Sustainability Australia with Graz van Egmond.
Welcome to episode 1 of our discussion with Blocktex and with ELK. Blocktex being the National Banksy Sustainability Award winner for the 36th Banksy Awards. And this will be episode 1 of a very interesting discussion that I've been able to sit down with both Adrian and Mandy. My name is Graz van Egmond. I'm the CEO of the Banksia Foundation. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'd like to thank ELK for hosting this podcast today. Today we're being joined by Adrian Jones, co-founder of Blocktex, who's an Australian trailblazer in textile recovery and circular innovation. Blocktex transforms textile waste into high-value raw materials, helping to tackle one of the world's fastest growing waste streams. And some of you might have recognised Adrian from winning the Gold Award at the 37th Banksia National Awards this year, which was quite exciting. And if you have a look on Blocktex win, it not only reflects the breakthrough in technology, but their role in reshaping how industries think about waste, resources and circularity. Adrian, do you want to talk about that?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you, ELK, for hosting us. So yes, and your kind words of around Blocktex are much appreciated, and it was a real honour to have won the Gold Award at the awards, and it takes pride of place in our boardroom. I think one thing we must get right from the outset is that as we have these discussions around textiles, we always have to refer to them as resources. They're not waste. Because if someone thinks of a waste, they instantly ascribe a lower value to it. So in Blocktex, the word waste is banned, and everything is a resource that we're just waiting to convert from one form to another. And I think if you just get that into your mindset, then I think it's a really useful way to frame the discussion around why textile recycling and resource conversion is such an exciting subject.
It is an exciting subject. And Mandy, you're here from ELK. Would you like to tell us a bit of your relationship with Blocktex?
Yes, of course. Well, we're already becoming great partners and we'll continue to do so. And I couldn't agree more with the concept of changing the mindset, not just with using the word waste, but the whole idea of how we produce product and how we keep it in circulation for longer. At ELK, we have a program called Renew where we're taking back product to keep it out of landfill, and part of that process is about using that old product as a resource, and that's how we came to meet Blocktex, is because commercially it needs to be a complete circle, and so we complete the piece that Blocktex needs in terms of being able to sell that product back out into the marketplace. But yeah, being able to take anything that's absolutely down to its last little thread. We chop garments up, we make them up into other pieces, we do all sorts of things, but right at the end of the day, Blocktex can take that and bring it back to us, so we can put it back into circulation. So yeah, it's a great relationship.
Great collaboration. We would always talk about collaborations, but I think that's quite a unique one. But hopefully today we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and find out what's next for Blocktex. So I want to start probably on a global versus local scenario. You're a standout success story in Australia, but the recognition for circular textile innovation still comes more so from the overseas markets. Am I correct? And do you want to maybe talk about Australian market versus international market and what you're seeing in that area?
Yeah, thanks, Graz. It's a very important point for us because Blocktex, please go to our website, look, we detail what we do there, but we have a chemical process by which we break down blended garments, hard to recycle, post-consumer garments, and we essentially produce a polyester work stream, a polyester pellet work stream, and a cellulose work stream. Now, there is no textile spinning of any scale in Australia, and all of our markets for the polyester will be overseas. So we've been doing a lot of work recently, and by recent I mean the last 12 months, developing products across Europe and Asia, because our polyester spins well back into yarns. And so we're showing at Tex World this week, for example, our fibre to fibre and our other products, e.g. buttons, zips, etc., which allow companies like Elk to then design completely for the end of life. So our markets are overseas, and that's important because I cannot see the economics when there will ever be a large-scale polyester spinning industry in Australia again, because we don't have the size of markets, nor do we have the downstream industries that are so necessary for the volumes required to make polyester spinning effective. But I do think it's a kind of a weird thing, which is, even though I've been in Australia a long time now, it's I just sometimes you think you have to go overseas to be successful before you can be successful in Australia. And it's being English by birth, it's something I don't fully understand in the Australian psyche, in which we have so many fans and so much support and institutions, financial and industrial, interested in us in Asia, in India, in Pakistan, in Europe, and in Australia, we still feel sometimes like we're starting over. And I don't understand why that is, but I do know that I have several theories. One of the things I think is that we have a kind of weird relationship with our clothes in Australia, because we understand what to do with cardboard. That goes in the blue bin, or glass goes in the yellow bin, or we take it to the container deposit scheme. So we know what to do with those predetermined streams. But textile resources, historically, we've just given them into the charitable sector. Now, the reuse sector is desperately important. It really is. But the volume of clothes being consumed and therefore put into those sectors now means that it can't all be sold onshore. So we're exporting those garments often to economies that may not have the ability to deal with them in terms of what happens at their end of life. So I kind of think that we just need to sort of really, if I have one request, is that if we engage in the consumption onshore, we have to engage in the recycling onshore, because you generate products, income, wealth, education, expertise here onshore, and that's kind of got to be the right thing when you wrap around all the environmental benefits as well.
And do you see it as I personally see it as a huge missed opportunity. We just don't get it. And the opportunity to create jobs, expertise in new areas. And are we scared of doing that, or is it?
It's a really good question, and it's not my area of expertise to try and answer everything concerned with that. But I do think that Australians are the largest consumers of textiles per capita in the world. I'm not sure that's a gong I ever wanted to win, but we do. Also, our average price of consumption is considerably lower when compared to OECD standards. So I'm not comparing it to everybody, we're comparing it to the 20 most industrialized nations in the world. So we consume more at a much lower price, which implies we like to buy lots of low-quality clothing. And that's really disappointing, especially for brands like Elk, who produce smaller amounts of very high-quality clothing that is durable and it lasts. But I do think we seem to be at times to be afraid of manufacturing in Australia.
Red light, we pause unsure. Green light, we run, but what for? In trade, each move feels like a bet. One wrong turn, you're not there yet. But then a door opens, a voice cuts through. Not competition, but something new. We learn, we lead, we trade with speed. Not just to win, but to grow what we need. Smarter together, bold under pressure. This is the game and we play it better.
I was walking around Brookvale in Sydney, where I live, and I knew Brookvale historically was an area of light to a medium scale manufacturing, car shops, steel fabricators, etc. I was walking around there on Saturday and I counted more craft breweries and coffee shops than manufacturers. And so you kind of know that's when we're in trouble, when it's actually okay for these skills to disappear. And we're kind of scared of that manufacturing. Again, I always find it interesting that Australia seems to be an economy determined by digging stuff out of the ground and then sending it somewhere else to be processed, rather than saying we have the engineering skills, we have the science skills, we have the daring do to actually go out there and do something. So why aren't we just creating more exciting industries like this onshore and adding the value here onshore?
I wanted to ask you a question on that, because is it around, I mean, the clothes that it's a whole different psyche of fashion. Is it because we're not also teaching at the school level and all that on appreciation of fashion or trends or what style is or all those sorts of things that we've sort of don't seem to be doing anymore? It's just, as I said, the fast fashion. What's the latest?
Yeah, I think where maybe Elk positions themselves is it's a challenging area of fashion, because our vision is to produce beautifully designed product with respect for people and planet. Now, ironically, if we really respected the planet, we'd be making less clothes, and that's something that we challenge ourselves on all the time. When you're talking about fast fashion, what we are trying to offer is choice. So the reason we say, well, it's good for Elk to grow as a business, we are a small business, but have a huge impact in this area. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can provide a commercial choice for customers who do care and do want to make good choices. So I think in the past, because, back in the 80s there was manufacturing and there was those sort of things, because that's exited the company for a whole raft of reasons, what we're trying to give back is choice to that customer who is trying to do the right thing and is trying to do that. So we find that our customer, whether they've actually walked into our store and said, I'm looking for something that is secondhand or renewed or redesigned or made out of beautiful quality recycled materials or whatever the reason may be. Often they don't ask that specifically, but they trust the brand because customers want that choice to be easy. And so I think what Blocktex and I and us at Elk are trying to do as a partnership is to try and make that choice commercially available for people. So yes, everything you've said is correct, and I think being sort of on the sort of trailblazing end of these things, the pointy end is always tricky because you've got to bring the customer along with you. And what we're finding at Elk is that customer's ready and listening. And so choices is the only thing we can offer, a better choice.
And I think it's also spreading the news to the silent majority.
Absolutely.
We have our circle of sustainability people and possibly your clients.
Yeah.
How do you break out of that sort of circle and communicate to that silent majority out there that would make a huge difference?
Yeah, because ironically, even though we have a great partnership, Elk itself prides itself on having little to no resources to use because we recycle and reuse everything. So it's a little bit of irony there. But what we hope that we're doing in this partnership and what we see Blocktex doing so well is opening up those avenues. And yes, there's some gaps in there, but how do we, you've got to start somewhere, and how do we give that choice to the consumer?
Adrian, I see you've got some interesting props next to you. I'd like to find out maybe more of the technical side of what you do and maybe explain to our audience a little bit more of what the company does.
Yeah, certainly. There's a bit of Harry Potter going on here. Look, what we do is, it started out, Blocktex started out actually as about eight years ago as a mechanical recycler. We thought we could simply chop up clothes very, very finely and then spin them into threads and make them into knits or a woven and then make them into T-shirts. And the short answer is that's exactly what we did with the CSIRO down in Melbourne at Deakin. And we did that. And then we realised there's two fundamental problems with it. The first one is that no matter how hard you want to, and times are changing, but I think this is still true, people want to know what's in the fibre. They want to know what it is. Because if it's too much polyester, it could be too warm in the summer, or it could be too... And so you have to have some view of what's actually in the yarn. And if it's a blended bag of fluff, you don't know what it is. And the second thing is, from a business perspective, chopping things up, compressing them into shapes, or none of the IP is defensible. So ultimately, you can be beaten on price. That can be offshored quite easily to a much lower labour cost, where actually chopping up is cheaper. And so we looked at it from an environmental point of view and a business point of view, and we couldn't decide actually whether it was the right thing to do. And we decided that it wasn't, and we went down a chemical separation route, which was much harder, and at the time was really nascent. And there's still not many of us doing it now, but Blocktex has a chemical separation process by which we work with anything that is polyester, cotton, polyester, any man-made cellulosic, so tencels, lyocells, hemp, jute, think of anything that's come from a plant. And we have a chemical separation process, and I'll come on to that in 1 second. But before that, some of the magic that actually was a completely unintended consequence of Blocktex, but I think this is really important, is that we collect post-consumer textiles, bed sheets, linens from industrial partners, retail partners, even direct from the consumer. But before we can recycle them, nobody's thought about what the end of life was. So they weren't designed for the end of life. So things have to be taken off them. So even now, 7.5, 8 years in, Blocktex is still very much a reactive recycler, because we have to react to what we are given, as opposed to being a proactive recycler where we know exactly what we're going to get because we've helped be involved in the design of it. But rather than seeing that as a problem, we saw it as an opportunity, because it's allowed us to develop a wonderful relationship across the NDIS sector, across the correctional services sector, partly with the charitable sector, where we engage people on a paid basis to take the buttons, take the zips, take the labels off things, not by hand. We've invented and we use different types of machinery to do it. But we employ probably between 100 and 130 people before the gate. And these are highly marginalised people who just have to take the buttons off or the labels off or the thing. So we work with, we have an NDIS partner called Help Enterprises in Brisbane, for example. They're one of ours. We have The Bridge in Melbourne, another partner of ours. And working with these people, I think, is some of Blocktex's best but unintended work, because we give meaning and purpose and employment to a group of highly marginalised people. And that's nothing to do with chemistry. That's just about a business deciding to do the right thing. Because yes, I could employ a robot to take the bits off my garments, but I could also employ a person with a disability who is seeking work. And I kind of know where we fell. And I think that's really important. It's that concept in business that just because you could, does it mean you should? And I think that's something we always have to bear in mind as we build businesses. Now, returning to the chemistry, which is, I'm not going to spill all my trade secrets, but essentially Blocktex is a process by which we, having taken all the buttons and dips off, the material is shredded and it arrives at our factory in a very shredded form. So it's shredded, it just literally just does look like, as my able assistant here is holding up, it is just a big bags of shred, and they arrive in about 250 kilogram bags. So in each, excuse me, I'm going to cough here. In each of our reactors, we have, and the reactors are the separation vessels where the chemistry and the magic occurs. And it took us about 47 experiments before we got this right. At times, working in a sugar refining factory in Mackay. That was an interesting experience. Now, we have a process by which we literally separate using a combination of some chemicals, heat, pressure, motion. We separate the cotton from the polyester, but that the polyester remains intact and the cotton is reduced to its next sort of chain down, if you will, which is cellulose, which is the building block of cotton. And so There's then a process of washing and drying and washing and drying, and then eventually we produce a polyester work stream and a polyester pellet. And this is a jar of polyester pellets. Now that is pure rPET. That has been separated completely from the cellulose, and that goes back into fibres. So the polyester gets separated from all the textile resource that comes in. We then produce a polyester work stream that goes off into polyester fibre, but that is our export product. The cotton, because we had that sort of a moment when we realised early in our chemistry, you could sacrifice one or the other in the reaction, but we decided to try to save both. We didn't want to have that Sophie's choice moment. We decided that we'd save both the children. And so we actually worked out a way the cellulose is dewatered, so we spin it and we dewater it, so it becomes a very, very thick clay. It looks a bit like pizza dough, but it's pure cellulose. And what is cellulose? It's essentially carbon with some other bits and bobs attached to a bit of water and a bit of hydrogen and but essentially we produce a very thick clay, and that acts as an ingredient back into products such as hydromulches and dust suppressants. So it's returned back onto land to add carbon and other properties back into the soil. And I think this is, again, an unintended consequence of BlockTex, because over the next 50 years, one of the most existential crises we're going to face in the world isn't going to be clothing us, it's going to be feeding us. And if anything we can do on that journey in any small way to add carbon or nutrients or life back into soil, then that's got to be a good thing. So the polyester goes back into fibres, back into textiles, but the cellulose goes another way. It ends up back in land, but instead of being in landfill, it becomes a very useful product.
It's amazing. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Excuse me. It's mind-boggling when you really have a look at. You start with one concept, and then you come out with all these other,
Tributaries.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is a really interesting point, and it's something that, again, I think, if there's anybody from government and from regulators watching this, it is really important to understand BlockTex, like other people in our spaces overseas who don't face some of these hurdles. We are remanufacturing new products. We deliberately set out to make polyester. We deliberately set out to make cellulose. We didn't get there by accident or some unintended consequence. We got there because we wanted to do it. It was a deliberate choice. Therefore, BlockTex isn't recycling. BlockTex is manufacturing. And that's a really, really, really important point, because it stops being an exercise with, oh, isn't it nice, they're recycling. It's actually, we treated it the same as car makers, as rocket makers, as shipbuilders, because we're manufacturing something. And that's a really important, again, mental definition.
And isn't it amazing if you call something recycling, which is, it's a nice to have, but when you're manufacturing, whole different, the language is such a different emphasis on that.
There's an irony from a fashion point of view, because I'm not quite sure at what point we started, but we really eliminated polyester from our ranges, and you'll see our pre-love range behind me here, and all these fibres are preferred fibres, so they're things that we've put a lot of consideration. None of them have any polyester in them. Here's the irony, is that now what you've managed to do is make polyester a better choice again, whereas before it was not. So I find that quite ironic that we've gone full circle.
Exactly.
And said that maybe polyester is what we should be making our garments out of.
And I think, again, it's really important that you can back up those claims with data, because everyone gets very excited about LCAs and have you got a life cycle assessment and this, and I think that you have to be careful that they don't just become a buzzword. But an LCA is really, really important, because you need to be able to demonstrate, particularly as we move into the areas we have to move into, in that recycling stops becoming just a marketing exercise to make the brand feel better and starts to move into an equally important financial discussion that the CFO and the CEO get excited about. As carbon accounting changes, and we have to increasingly, and companies increasingly have to report on their Scope 3s and their Scope 3 reductions, which is going to be a heck of a journey over the next 10 years, we can demonstrate through our LCA that our PET, to Marnie's point from a product perspective, is about 76% better than virgin across a range of attributes such as energy, water usage, chemical usage, etc. 76% better on its own makes me feel good, but it doesn't matter because until you convert that into a carbon unit, into an ACCU, which the CFO can then say, by us purchasing this rPET at this amount with this much lower embedded carbon, I can use that to offset my scope 3s. And that's when the argument becomes much more balanced, but much more mature and more interesting.
Well, you're putting in pragmatic solutions. I mean, you really are. I mean, it's we need to stop just ticking boxes for the sake of ticking boxes. But what is the return on investment? As I said, the financial sector of any organisation really has to see what it's going to gain from it. And I think this is a key example.
Yeah, and you've touched on, I think, something that we have in common is that we're living proof of a commercial choice to do the right thing actually being a profitable commercial choice as well.
Exactly. I want to get on to the funding landscape. We all need funds. We all need to survive and go forward. Australian innovation often sort of finds itself caught in that funding gap. Look, grants can be piecemeal and short-term, while the big transformative capital often flows to multinational corporations and the bigger boys. The federal government has flagged circular economy as a national priority, so that's exciting. But yet the funding mechanism still lags behind. What do you feel about that?
Oh, I think any startup, I mean, raising capital in any starting or scaling business is always a challenge. I think then deciding to raise money in an environmental sector adds an extra frisson of excitement into that. I think the funding landscape in Australia is everyone wants, it's very technology based. It's very technology biased perhaps. And so it tends to look more for the next Uber or the next Canva, or it wants that sort of more, software as a service kind of, rather than coming back to my earlier point in that we've kind of don't want to any longer understand or be manufacturers because somehow we're better than that. And I think that therefore finding it's been tough to find backers in that manufacturing space. We've been blessed. We've had a fantastic long-term investor in BlockText, plus other smaller investors, but we've had a person who shared our vision from the very start and has helped the BlockText to grow what we are now. But even now, going into what will probably be our Series C, those investors will be overseas. And that's both interesting and disappointing in equal measure, but we will take the money where it comes. But that means that there's a technology transfer potentially overseas.
But don't we have the appetite here? I mean, are we promoting what we're doing enough? I mean, I'm a great communicator and believe in marketing what we're doing the right way, but are we doing it well enough to get investors excited about what's happening in this country?
I think we've got the smarts. I don't think. I mean, we've done a lot of work across a variety of Australian universities, research centres, and we've got a lot of really, really smart people. And so I don't think Australia's sort of struggling to come up with the ideas. I then think the commercialisation of those ideas at scale is really hard here. I'm pleased that we have the National Reconstruction Fund, which has been quite difficult to deal with. But there's a change of management, so we're hoping we'll continue to work with that. But that's the kind of scale of industry. That's the kind of scale of funding we need. We're now in the sort of hundreds of millions of dollars of funding for plants, not in 5. And you have that funding gap. You're either sort of applying to your local council for sort of $100,000 if you're lucky, and then you've got to have sort of 15 layers of reports to justify that expenditure, or it's 150 million. You're like, well, what happened to the bit in the middle? And I think that's been incredibly challenging. But say BlockText has been lucky because we've been backed by a strong investor. But I do think if I compare it to Europe, where they have the Green Fund, which is a multi-billion-dollar fund across all member states there. That's given the ability for a variety of textile recycling opportunities, from mechanical to chemical, to get up and scale with a combination of equity, loans and grants. And we don't seem to have that landscape in Oz, which is kind of disappointing. But you have to sort of, live with what you've got. But I do find it very interesting that as we're going through our Series C now, all the significant investors on the ticket are all overseas.